Most of us walk through life carrying invisible chains. We tell ourselves we're free, but we're prisoners of our own illusions. We chase happiness in all the wrong places, avoid pain like it's poison, and wonder why we feel so empty, so lost, so stuck in patterns that keep repeating. The truth is brutal but necessary. Freedom isn't found in comfort. It's not discovered in getting what you want. Real freedom lives on the other side of harsh realities most people spend their entire lives running from. The ancient Stoics understood something we've forgotten. They knew that true liberation doesn't come from changing your circumstances. It comes from changing how you see them. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, wrote these words in his private journal. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength, not comfort, not ease. Strength. Today we're diving deep into 6 harsh Stoic truths that will shake you to your core. These aren't motivational quotes to make you feel good. These are brutal realizations that will strip away your illusions and force you to confront reality as it actually is. Each truth we explore will hurt. It will challenge everything you've been told about happiness, success, and what it means to live well. But if you can face these truths, if you can sit with the discomfort they bring, something remarkable happens. The chains fall away. The prison door opens. You discover a freedom so profound, so unshakable, that nothing external can ever steal it from you again. Before we begin, I need something from you. This isn't background noise while you scroll through your phone. This isn't something you half listen to while doing other things. Each truth we discuss builds on the last. Miss one and you miss the entire foundation. Like this video right now if you're ready for real change, not just temporary inspiration. Comment as we go through each truth, especially when something hits deep. Share this with someone who's tired of living in denial. And most importantly, stay until the end, because the 6th truth will completely transform how you see yourself and your place in the world. Let's begin with a question that will make you uncomfortable. Are you actually living? Or are you just surviving in the most comfortable prison you've ever built? The first harsh Stoic truth is this: your suffering comes from your expectations, not your circumstances. We've been conditioned to believe that happiness comes from getting what we want. The right job, the perfect relationship, enough money, recognition, success. We chase these things believing they'll finally give us peace. But here's what the Stoics discovered thousands of years ago. The gap between what you expect and what actually happens is where all your misery lives. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's greatest philosophers, said something that will disturb you. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Think about that. A man who literally had his freedom stolen from him understood that his suffering didn't come from his chains. It came from his resistance to reality. Look at your own life. When do you suffer most? Is it when something terrible actually happens, or is it when things don't go according to your plan? When someone doesn't text back fast enough? When your promotion gets delayed? When people don't appreciate your efforts? When the weather ruins your plans? When traffic makes you late? The event itself isn't causing your pain. Your expectation of how things should be different is what's killing you. Most people live their entire lives as emotional hostages to their expectations. They expect fairness in an unfair world. They expect others to think and act like them. They expect their hard work to always pay off exactly when and how they want it to. They expect life to be predictable, controllable, manageable. And when reality doesn't match their expectations, they don't question their expectations, they question reality. The Stoic approach is radically different. Instead of demanding that the world conform to your expectations, you align your expectations with how the world actually works. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on your goals. It means understanding that your peace doesn't depend on outcomes. Your strength doesn't depend on circumstances. Your worth doesn't depend on external validation. Marcus Aurelius faced plagues, wars, betrayals, and personal tragedies. Yet he remained calm and focused because he expected difficulty. He expected loss. He expected pain. Not because he was pessimistic, but because he was realistic. When hardship came, it wasn't a shock that derailed him. It was just life being life. This truth hurts because it forces you to take responsibility for your own emotional state. You can't blame your parents, your boss, your ex, the economy, or society for how you feel. Yes, external events can be genuinely difficult and painful. But your suffering, the stories you tell yourself about what these events mean, the way you spiral into despair or anger, that's on you. Here's what happens when you truly internalize this truth. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become a master of your responses. You stop waiting for life to treat you better and start treating yourself better regardless of how life behaves. You realize that the prison you've been living in doesn't have bars made of steel. It has bars made of unexamined expectations. The second harsh Stoic truth will challenge everything you believe about control. You control almost nothing, but the little you do control changes everything. We live in a culture obsessed with control. We're told to take charge of our lives, make things happen, be the CEO of our own destiny. But this obsession with controlling everything is actually making us powerless. The Stoics understood something that modern self-help completely misses. True power comes from focusing only on what's actually within your control and releasing everything else. Epictetus taught his students to divide everything into two categories: things that are up to you and things that are not up to you. He said, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Sounds simple, but most people get this completely wrong. They waste enormous amounts of energy trying to control things that are fundamentally outside their influence. Let's be brutally honest about what you actually control. You control your thoughts, but only when you're aware enough to catch them. You control your choices, but only in the present moment. You control your responses, but only if you pause before reacting. You control your effort, but not the results of that effort. You control your words and actions, but not how others interpret or respond to them. Everything else is outside your control. Other people's opinions, decisions, and behaviors, the weather, traffic, and delays, the past and the future, economic conditions, political outcomes, and global events, your reputation, your success, and how long you live. The list of what you don't control is infinite. The list of what you do control is tiny. This truth is harsh because it shatters the illusion that you're the director of your life's movie. You're not. You're an actor who gets to choose how to play your role, but you don't write the script, pick the other actors, or control how the audience reacts. Accepting this feels like giving up, like becoming powerless. But it's actually the opposite. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, all that wasted energy gets redirected toward what you actually can influence. Instead of being scattered across 1,000 worries, your focus becomes laser sharp. Instead of being reactive to every external change, you become proactive about your internal responses. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Not because the future doesn't matter, but because the present moment is the only place where your control actually exists. In this moment right now, you can choose your thoughts. You can choose your attitude. You can choose your next action. That's it. That's your entire domain of control. But within that small domain lies infinite power. People who master this distinction become unshakable. They don't panic when plans change because they never expected to control the outcome anyway. They don't get devastated by rejection because they know they can only control their effort, not the response. They don't waste energy on past regrets or future anxieties because they understand that their power exists only in the now. This shift in focus is life-changing. You stop being a weather vane spinning with every external wind and become a mountain that remains steady regardless of the storm. You stop asking the "why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "now how do I respond to what's happening?" That question, that shift from victim to responsible, is where your freedom lives. The third harsh, Stoic truth cuts deeper than the others. Most of your problems are self-created through your relationship with your own mind. We blame external circumstances for our misery, but the Stoics knew better. Your worst enemy isn't out there. It's between your ears. The voice in your head that never stops commenting, judging, worrying, and creating stories about what everything means. That voice you think is you. The one that tells you you're not good enough, that something terrible is about to happen, that you should be further along by now. That voice is not your friend, and it's definitely not you. Marcus Aurelius spent years studying his own mind, and what he discovered is unsettling. Today I escaped anxiety. Or no, I discarded it because it was within me in my own perceptions, not outside. Think about that admission. The Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man alive, struggled with anxiety just like you do. But he understood something crucial. The anxiety wasn't caused by his circumstances, it was caused by his thoughts about his circumstances. Most people are at war with reality because they're at war with their own minds. They have a thought and immediately believe it's true. They feel an emotion and assume it means something significant about their situation. They replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, and torture themselves with stories that exist nowhere except in their heads. Here's what's really happening. Your mind is designed to keep you alive, not to keep you happy. It's constantly scanning for threats, problems, and dangers. It takes random events and creates patterns. It takes neutral situations and assigns meaning. It takes temporary feelings and turns them into permanent identities. Your mind is not trying to hurt you, but it's also not trying to give you an accurate picture of reality. The Stoics practiced something revolutionary. They learned to observe their thoughts without being consumed by them. They understood that having a thought doesn't make it true. Feeling an emotion doesn't make it meaningful. Your mind will generate thousands of thoughts today. Most of them are random, many are negative, and almost all of them are optional. Seneca wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." He was talking about thoughts. Each thought is temporary, no matter how intense it feels in the moment. The thought that's consuming you right now will be replaced by another thought in seconds or minutes. The emotion that feels so overwhelming will pass like weather through the sky. But here's where it gets harsh. If you're not observing your thoughts, they're controlling you. If you're not questioning your assumptions, you're living in a prison built from unexamined beliefs. If you're not creating space between yourself and your mental chatter, you're being driven by unconscious patterns that may have nothing to do with your current reality. This truth hurts because it means taking responsibility for your inner world. You can't blame your depression on your circumstances if you're feeding it with negative thoughts all day. You can't blame your anxiety on external events if you're constantly imagining disasters that haven't happened. You can't blame your anger on other people if you're the one choosing to replay their words over and over. The good news is profound. Once you realize that most of your suffering is self-created, you also realize it's self-solvable. You don't need to change the world to find peace. You need to change your relationship with your own mind. You don't need perfect circumstances to be happy. You need to stop believing every story your thoughts tell you about why you can't be happy right now. The fourth harsh Stoic truth will destroy your need for approval and validation. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business, and seeking their approval is spiritual suicide. We live in an age where validation has become a drug. Likes, comments, approval from strangers and loved ones alike. We've become addicted to external confirmation of our worth. We dress for others, speak for others, choose careers to impress others, and shape our entire identities around what we think other people want us to be. But here's the brutal reality the Stoics understood. The moment you make other people's opinions more important than your own integrity, you stop being yourself and become a performer in someone else's play. Epictetus said something that will shake you. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but only to what he does himself. Most people spend more time worrying about what others think of their choices than actually making choices that align with their values. They're so busy managing their image that they forget to live their life. Think about how much energy you waste on this. You don't speak up in meetings because you're worried people will think you're stupid. You don't pursue your dreams because you're afraid of being judged for failing. You stay in relationships that drain you because you're scared of what people will say if you leave. You buy things you can't afford to maintain an image that isn't even authentic. You apologize for your preferences, your boundaries, your very existence. This is what the Stoics called slavery to opinion. And it's worse than physical chains because you put these chains on yourself. No one forced you to care what strangers think. No one demanded that you live your life seeking approval from people who barely know you. You chose this prison, and you can choose to leave it. Marcus Aurelius, who had millions of people watching his every move, wrote these words in private. Remember that very little disturbs the wise man, for he is not concerned with what people say about him. The most observed man in the Roman Empire understood that other people's opinions were just thoughts in their heads. Nothing more, nothing less. Here's what happens when you truly internalize this truth. You stop performing and start living. You stop trying to be perfect for others and start being authentic for yourself. You realize that the people whose opinions actually matter are the ones who love you regardless of your performance. Everyone else is just background noise in the movie of your life. But this truth cuts deeper than just not caring what people think. It's about recognizing that seeking approval is actually a form of arrogance. When you desperately need others to validate your choices, you're essentially saying that their judgment is more important than your own inner wisdom. You're saying that strangers on the internet know better than you do what's right for your life. The Stoics taught something radical. Your worth is not determined by consensus. Your value doesn't fluctuate based on other people's moods, insecurities, or limited perspectives. You are not a stock whose price goes up and down based on market opinion. You are a human being with inherent dignity that exists independent of anyone else's acknowledgement. This doesn't mean becoming cold or dismissive of feedback. Wise counsel from people you trust and respect has value, but there's a massive difference between considering advice and needing approval. One comes from strength, the other from weakness. One enhances your decision-making, the other paralyzes it. The freedom that comes from releasing this need is intoxicating. You start making choices based on your values instead of your fears. You speak your truth even when your voice shakes. You pursue paths that excite you even if they confuse others. You become magnetic because authenticity is rare in a world full of performers. Seneca captured this perfectly when he wrote, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster." He wasn't just talking about external events. He was talking about the disaster of living your entire life for an audience that isn't even paying attention. The fifth harsh Stoic truth will challenge your relationship with pleasure and pain. Comfort is not your friend, and avoiding discomfort is making you weak. Modern life is designed around one principle: maximize pleasure, minimize pain. We have apps to avoid boredom, pills to avoid sadness, distractions to avoid difficult thoughts, and endless entertainment to avoid sitting with ourselves. We've created the most comfortable generation in human history, and we're also the most anxious, depressed, and spiritually empty. This isn't a coincidence. The Stoics understood something we've forgotten. Strength comes from struggle, wisdom comes from difficulty, and character is forged in the fire of hardship. When you constantly run from discomfort, you rob yourself of the very experiences that would make you stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Seneca practiced something that sounds insane by modern standards. He would deliberately sleep on hard floors, eat simple food, wear rough clothes, and expose himself to cold. Not because he hated himself, but because he understood that voluntary discomfort builds involuntary strength. He was training for life's inevitable hardships by choosing smaller hardships on his own terms. Most people today can't sit in silence for 5 minutes without reaching for their phone. They can't feel hungry without immediately eating. They can't feel sad without numbing themselves with Netflix, shopping, or social media. They've become so allergic to discomfort that the slightest inconvenience sends them into emotional chaos. But here's what the Stoics knew. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you become a little weaker. Every time you avoid a difficult conversation, you become a little less courageous. Every time you distract yourself from uncomfortable feelings, you become a little less capable of handling life's real challenges. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Ew. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He meant that obstacles aren't just inconveniences to overcome. They're the very mechanism by which you become stronger. The weight at the gym doesn't exist to make your workout easier. It exists to create resistance that builds muscle. Life's difficulties serve the same purpose for your character. This truth is harsh because it means stopping running from everything that feels hard. It means choosing the difficult conversation over avoiding conflict. It means doing the work even when you don't feel like it. It means sitting with your emotions instead of immediately trying to fix or escape them. It means accepting that growth feels uncomfortable because you're literally breaking out of your current limitations. The comfort zone isn't just a place of physical ease. It's a mental prison where you repeat the same patterns, think the same thoughts, and yet you've developed required you to be bad when you stepped outside that zone. Every skill, the same results. Every meaningful change in your life happened at something before you got good at it. Every relationship that matters was built through vulnerable moments that felt risky and uncertain. Epictetus, who knew real hardship as a slave, taught his students that hardship is not something that happens to you. It's something that happens for you. It's life's way of showing you what you're capable of. It's the universe's training program for becoming the person you're meant to be. But the modern world has convinced you that you should feel good all the time. That if you're struggling, something is wrong. That if you're uncomfortable, you need to fix it immediately. This is a lie that's keeping you weak, dependent, and fragile. The Stoics taught the opposite, that your capacity to handle discomfort is directly proportional to your capacity to handle life. When you start embracing discomfort instead of avoiding it, something remarkable happens. You discover that most of the things you were afraid of aren't actually dangerous, they're just uncomfortable. And discomfort, unlike pain, is temporary and purposeful. It's your body and mind adapting to new challenges, growing stronger, becoming more capable. This doesn't mean seeking out unnecessary suffering or ignoring genuine problems. It means recognizing that some discomfort is the price of growth, and that price is always worth paying. It means understanding that the person who can handle discomfort with grace is the person who can handle anything life throws at them. The sixth and final harsh Stoic truth will fundamentally change how you see yourself and your place in the world. You are going to die, and remembering this is the key to finally living. Most people live as if they're immortal. They postpone their dreams, delay important conversations, and waste precious time on meaningless pursuits because somewhere deep down, They believe they have unlimited tomorrows. But the Stoics practiced something that sounds morbid but is actually liberating. They meditated on death not to become depressed but to become alive. Memento mori. Remember you must die. This wasn't a threat or a curse. It was a daily reminder that your time here is limited, uncertain, and therefore infinitely precious. Marcus Aurelius, who had access to every pleasure and comfort imaginable, wrote in his personal journal, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." He understood that fear of death was making people afraid of life. Think about how this awareness changes everything. That argument you've been avoiding because it might be awkward. That creative project you keep putting off until you have more time. That trip you've been planning for years but never booking. That person you love but haven't told. That risk you know you should take but keep finding excuses to delay. All of this hesitation comes from acting as if you have forever. But you don't have forever. You have this moment, this breath, this heartbeat. And the next one isn't guaranteed. This isn't meant to terrify you. It's meant to wake you up. Because when you truly understand that your time is finite, you stop wasting it on things that don't matter. Seneca, who lived through political upheaval, exile, and constant uncertainty, wrote something that will disturb your comfortable assumptions about time. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. He watched people complain about not having enough time while simultaneously throwing away hours on worry, gossip, mindless entertainment, and petty grievances. The awareness of death strips away everything non-essential. It forces you to ask the questions most people spend their entire lives avoiding. If I only had 1 year left, what would I focus on? If I knew this conversation might be my last with this person, what would I say? If I could only accomplish one more thing before I die, what would it be? These aren't theoretical exercises, they're practical tools for living with intention instead of drifting through existence on autopilot. Because here's what the Stoics discovered: the person who remembers death lives more fully than the person who pretends it will never come. This truth is harsh because it destroys your illusion of endless time. It forces you to confront the reality that every day you waste is a day you'll never get back. Every moment you spend angry about the past or anxious about the future is a moment stolen from the only time that actually exists, right now. But there's something even more unsettling about this truth. It's not just that you're going to die, it's that everyone you love is going to die too. Your parents, your children, your closest friends. The people you take for granted, the relationships you assume will always be there. The voices you'll never hear again once they're gone. This awareness should terrify you into treating every interaction as if it might be precious, because it might be. Marcus Aurelius lost children, friends, mentors, and allies. He knew intimately that love and loss are inseparable. But instead of becoming cynical or closed off, he became more present, more grateful, more intentional about how he spent his remaining time. He understood that the inevitability of loss doesn't make love meaningless. It makes love urgent. When you truly internalize that your time is limited, you stop tolerating relationships that drain your energy. You stop engaging in conversations that lead nowhere. You stop participating in activities that feel hollow or meaningless, not because you become selfish, but because you become selective. You realize that saying yes to everything meaningful requires saying no to everything that isn't. This awareness also changes how you handle setbacks and failures. When you remember that your time is finite, you stop taking rejection so personally. You stop letting embarrassment paralyze you. You realize that the opinion of people who won't even remember this moment next week is not worth sacrificing your dreams over. You understand that failure is only permanent if you die before you try again. The Stoics practiced an exercise that sounds extreme but is profoundly clarifying. They would imagine losing everything they currently have: their health, their relationships, their possessions, their abilities. Not to become pessimistic, but to develop gratitude for what exists right now. Because everything you have, including your life itself, is temporary and borrowed. This doesn't mean living in constant fear or becoming morbidly obsessed with death. It means living with the urgency that comes from understanding how rare and brief this experience really is. You are a collection of atoms that happen to organize themselves into consciousness for a few decades in an infinite universe. The odds of your existence are so astronomically small that your very presence here is miraculous. Yet most people sleepwalk through this miracle. They complain about minor inconveniences while ignoring major blessings. They postpone joy while accumulating grievances. They wait for permission to live fully while their time quietly slips away. They act as if being alive is ordinary when it's actually the most extraordinary thing that will ever happen to them. Epictetus, who understood suffering in ways most of us never will, taught his students something profound about the relationship between mortality and meaning. He said that remembering death doesn't make life sadder. It makes life sacred. Every conversation becomes more honest. Every sunset becomes more beautiful. Every moment of connection becomes more precious because you know it won't last forever. This is the final liberation the Stoics offered: freedom from the illusion that you have unlimited time to become the person you want to be, to love the people who matter, to do the work that calls to you. You don't have unlimited time. You have today. You have this moment. You have whatever breath you're taking right now. And that limitation, that constraint, that undeniable deadline approaching from an unknown distance is not a tragedy. It's a gift, because it forces you to choose. It demands that you prioritize. It insists that you stop rehearsing for life and start living it. The person who remembers death speaks more truthfully because they know their words are finite. They love more openly because they understand that love is temporary. They take more risks because they realize that the biggest risk is dying with their potential still locked inside them. They forgive more quickly because they know that grudges are luxuries they can't afford. They appreciate more deeply because they understand that everything beautiful is also fragile. This is not about becoming reckless or abandoning responsibility. It's about becoming intentional. It's about recognizing that your mortality is not a design flaw in the human experience. It's the very thing that makes your choices matter. Your relationships precious and your brief time here infinitely valuable. When you stop running from the reality of death, you finally start running toward the fullness of life. When you stop pretending you have forever, you start making the most of whatever time remains. When you stop fearing the end of your story, you start writing chapters worth reading. These 6 harsh truths form a complete philosophy of liberation. But knowing them intellectually and living them daily are 2 completely different things. The Stoics didn't just think about these ideas, they practiced them like spiritual athletes training for the ultimate competition, which is life itself. They understood that wisdom without application is just sophisticated entertainment. Let me tell you what happens when you start living these truths, instead of just understanding them. When you truly accept that your suffering comes from your expectations, you stop being a victim of circumstances and become an architect of your own peace. You wake up each morning expecting nothing from the world but ready to give everything to it. Traffic jams become opportunities to practice patience. Delayed flights become chances to read that book. Rejection becomes redirection towards something better suited for you. When you focus only on what you can control, your anxiety doesn't disappear overnight, but it transforms into purposeful action. Instead of worrying about whether your business will succeed, you focus on making the next phone call. Instead of obsessing over whether someone likes you, you concentrate on being the kind of person you respect. Your energy stops scattering in 1,000 directions and becomes laser-focused on what actually matters. When you recognize that most of your problems are self-created through your relationship with your mind, you develop what the Stoics called the discipline of desire. You stop believing every thought that crosses your consciousness. You learn to observe your mental chatter like clouds passing through the sky. Interesting, temporary, but not defining who you are or determining how you feel. Seneca wrote something that captures this perfectly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But he also understood that realizing this is the easy part. Living it is the work of a lifetime. Every day presents new opportunities to choose your response instead of defaulting to your reactions. When you release your need for approval and validation, something magical happens. You become magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract attention, but because authenticity is so rare that it naturally draws people in. You start speaking your truth even when your voice shakes. You pursue goals that excite you even when others don't understand them. You set boundaries that protect your energy even when it disappoints people who are benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Marcus Aurelius faced constant pressure to please senators, citizens, and foreign dignitaries. Yet he wrote, "Very little disturbs the wise man, for he is not concerned with what people say about him." This wasn't indifference to others. This was understanding that his integrity mattered more than his image. His character mattered more than his reputation. His values mattered more than his popularity. When you embrace discomfort instead of avoiding it, you discover something revolutionary. Most of the things you've been afraid of aren't actually dangerous, they're just uncomfortable. And discomfort is temporary. It's your mind and body adapting to new challenges, growing stronger, becoming more capable of handling whatever life brings. This is where the Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort becomes transformative. You don't wait for life to test you. You test yourself. You take cold showers not because you enjoy them, but because you're training your mind to do hard things. You have difficult conversations not because they're fun, but because avoiding them makes you weaker. You sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of immediately trying to escape them because you're building your capacity to handle life's inevitable storms. Epictetus taught his students something profound about the relationship between comfort and character. He said that every moment you choose the easy path over the right path, you're making yourself a little less capable of choosing correctly when it really matters. Every time you avoid discomfort, you're training yourself to be controlled by your circumstances instead of controlling your responses to them. But here's what most people miss about Stoic discipline. It's not about becoming a robot who feels nothing. It's about becoming someone who feels everything but isn't controlled by those feelings. It's about developing the strength to stay true to your values even when your emotions are screaming at you to do otherwise. When you truly understand that you're going to die and everyone you love is going to die, something shifts in your priorities. You stop postponing joy. You stop waiting for perfect conditions to pursue your dreams. You stop taking the people you love for granted. You realize that the conversation you're avoiding might be the most important one you'll ever have. The risk you're not taking might be the one that changes everything. This awareness of mortality doesn't make you reckless. It makes you intentional. You start asking different questions, not what if I fail, but what if I never try? Not what will people think, but what will I think of myself if I let fear make my decisions? Not what if this doesn't work out, but what if it does and I missed my chance because I was too afraid to find out? The Stoics practiced an exercise called the view from above. They would imagine themselves from the perspective of the cosmos, seeing their problems in the context of infinite space and time, not to make their lives feel meaningless, but to help them focus on what actually matters. From that cosmic perspective, your embarrassing moment last week disappears into insignificance. Your current worry about what others think becomes laughably small. Your regrets about the past and anxieties about the future fade away, leaving only the eternal present moment where your real power exists. But living these truths requires daily practice. The Stoics had morning and evening routines designed to reinforce these principles. In the morning, Marcus Aurelius would prepare himself for the day by expecting difficulty, reminding himself of what he could and couldn't control, and setting intentions based on his values rather than his desires. In the evening, he would review the day, noting where he had lived according to Stoic principles and where he had fallen short. This isn't about perfection. Seneca struggled with anger his entire life. Marcus Aurelius battled anxiety and self-doubt. Epictetus dealt with physical pain and the trauma of slavery. They weren't superhuman. They were human beings who chose to work with reality instead of against it. They chose to build strength through struggle instead of seeking comfort at all costs. They chose to face truth instead of living in comfortable illusions. The beautiful paradox of Stoicism is that by accepting the harshness of reality, you find a peace that can't be disturbed by external circumstances. By acknowledging your lack of control, you discover the immense power you actually possess. By remembering death, you finally start living. By expecting nothing from the world, you're prepared for everything it might bring. These 6 truths aren't just philosophical concepts to understand. They're tools to use, practices to develop, and a way of being to embody. They won't make your life easy. They'll make you strong enough to handle whatever difficulty comes. They won't guarantee that good things will happen to you. They'll guarantee that you'll be able to find meaning and maintain your dignity regardless of what happens. The Stoics understood something that our comfort-obsessed culture has forgotten. Character is built through challenge, not comfort. Wisdom comes through wrestling with difficult questions, not avoiding them. Strength develops by carrying heavy loads, not by eliminating all weight from your life. Peace is found by accepting reality, not by demanding that reality conform to your preferences. This is your invitation to stop living as a victim of circumstances and start living as a master of your responses. To stop seeking happiness in external conditions and start creating it through internal discipline. To stop postponing your real life until conditions are perfect and start embracing the imperfect life you actually have. The path won't be easy, but it will be worth it, because on the other side of these harsh truths lies a freedom so complete, so unshakable, that nothing external can ever steal it from you again. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a strength that doesn't depend on comfort, a joy that doesn't depend on getting what you want. This is the promise of Stoicism. Not that life will be painless, but that you'll be strong enough to find meaning in the pain. Not that you'll get everything you desire, but that you'll be content with whatever you receive. Not that you'll live forever, but that you'll live fully for whatever time remains. The question isn't whether these truths are harsh. They are. The question is whether you're ready to let them set you free. The choice is yours, but the window is closing. Every day you delay accepting these truths is another day you remain imprisoned by illusions that feel safe but keep you small. The Stoics didn't discover these principles to make life comfortable. They discovered them to make life meaningful, even when comfort is nowhere to be found. Right now, as you sit here listening to these words, you have a decision to make. You can treat this like entertainment, like another video you consume and forget, or you can recognize it for what it really is. A blueprint for breaking free from the invisible chains you've been carrying your entire life. The chains of expectation, the chains of seeking control over the uncontrollable. The chains of living in your head instead of reality, the chains of needing approval from people who don't even know themselves. The chains of avoiding discomfort at all costs, and the chains of pretending you have unlimited time to become who you're meant to be. But here's what happens to most people who encounter these truths. They nod along. They feel inspired for a moment. Maybe they even share the video with a friend. Then they go back to their old patterns. They go back to complaining about circumstances they can't control. They go back to seeking validation from people whose opinions shouldn't matter. They go back to avoiding difficult conversations and postponing important decisions. They go back to living as if they have forever to get their act together. Don't be most people, because most people die with their potential still locked inside them. Most people spend their entire lives preparing to live instead of actually living. Most people reach the end of their journey and realize they wasted decades being afraid of things that were never actually dangerous, just uncomfortable. The Stoics had a practice that will disturb you if you really think about it. They would regularly imagine this day, this conversation, this moment being their last. Not to become morbid, but to inject urgency into their choices. What if this were your last chance to choose courage over comfort? What if this were your final opportunity to stop caring what strangers think of your dreams? What if this moment right now were your last shot at breaking free from the patterns that have kept you stuck? Because here's the truth that cuts deeper than all the others. You already know what you need to do, not the big life-changing moves that require months of planning. The small daily choices that require nothing but the decision to stop being who you've always been and start being who you know you could become. You know what conversation you've been avoiding. You know what risk you should take. You know what boundary you need to set. You know what dream you've been postponing. You know what person you need to forgive, starting with yourself. The voice in your head telling you it's not the right time, that you need to wait until you feel more confident, that you should prepare more before taking action. That voice isn't wisdom. It's fear dressed up as prudence. It's the same voice that has convinced millions of people to live lives of quiet desperation, always getting ready to live but never actually living. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in his private journal that should shake you awake. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. He understood that being human isn't a passive experience. It's an active responsibility. Every day you wake up, you're being handed another opportunity to practice being the kind of person you respect. Another chance to align your actions with your values instead of your fears. But most people treat their lives like a dress rehearsal for some future performance that never comes. They're always getting ready to be brave tomorrow, to be honest next week, to pursue their dreams next year. They live in the gap between their current reality and their imagined future, missing the only moment where change is actually possible. Right now. The Stoics called this the discipline of action, not just thinking about what you should do, but doing it. Not just understanding what's right, but choosing it even when it's difficult. Not just knowing what would make you proud of yourself, but taking the steps to become that person starting today. Seneca faced exile, political persecution, and eventually execution, yet he wrote, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. He understood that transformation isn't a gradual process of becoming slightly better over time. It's a series of decisive moments where you choose to end one version of yourself and begin another. Today can be one of those moments, but only if you decide it is. Here's what the Stoics knew that modern culture has forgotten. Inspiration without action is just entertainment. Knowledge without application is just intellectual decoration. Understanding these truths without living them is just another way to avoid the discomfort of actual change. You don't need more information. You don't need more motivation. You don't need better circumstances. You need to stop preparing for life and start living it. The person you'll be 1 year from now is being created by the choices you make today, not the big dramatic choices that make great stories. The quiet, unglamorous choices that no one else will ever notice. The choice to do the difficult thing when you'd rather do the easy thing. The choice to speak truthfully when lying would be more convenient. The choice to act on your values when your emotions are pulling you in the opposite direction. Every single day, you're either building the prison of your limitations or constructing the foundation of your freedom. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you're adding another bar to your cage. Every time you choose short-term pleasure over long-term fulfillment, you're postponing your own liberation. Every time you choose to react instead of respond, you're handing your power over to circumstances and other people. But every time you choose differently, even in small ways, you're proving to yourself that you're not a victim of your conditions. You're the author of your responses. You're not controlled by your past or constrained by your current circumstances. You're free to choose who you become next, starting with the very next choice you make. The Stoics understood that freedom isn't the absence of constraints. It's the ability to choose your response to those constraints. It's not about controlling what happens to you. It's about controlling what you do with what happens to you. It's not about avoiding all pain and difficulty. It's about finding meaning in the pain and growing stronger through the difficulty. This is why these truths hurt before they heal. They force you to confront the gap between who you are and who you could be. They make you face the reality of how much time you've wasted and how much potential you've left untapped. They show you that the life you've been living might be safe, but it's not the life you're capable of living. But pain is not punishment. Pain is information. The discomfort you feel when confronting these truths isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something is changing. It's your old self dying so your true self can be born. It's the sound of chains breaking that you didn't even know you were wearing. Epictetus spent years in physical chains before he understood that the real prison was mental. The real freedom was internal. He taught his students that no one can hurt you without your permission. No one can make you angry without your cooperation. No one can steal your peace without your participation. The power to remain unshaken in any storm lives within you, but you have to choose to claim it. This choice, this decision to stop being a passenger in your own life and become the driver. This commitment to stop explaining your circumstances and start changing your responses. This is what separates those who merely survive from those who truly live. This is what distinguishes those who die with regrets from those who die with dignity. This is what makes the difference between a life of quiet desperation and a life of meaningful purpose. The clock is ticking. Not just the minutes until this video ends, but the days until your story does. The Stoics meditated on death not to become depressed, but to become desperate in the best possible way. Desperate enough to stop wasting time on things that don't matter. Desperate enough to start focusing on what does. Desperate enough to realize that your life is too short and too precious to spend it seeking approval from people who don't understand your dreams, avoiding discomfort that would make you stronger, or postponing joy until conditions are perfect. You have everything you need to begin this transformation. You don't need more money, more time, more support, or more confidence. You need the willingness to be uncomfortable for a while as you build new patterns. You need the courage to disappoint people who have become accustomed to your weakness. You need the discipline to do what you know is right even when you don't feel like it. Most that this isn't about becoming perfect, importantly. You need to understand. The Stoics weren't perfect. They were human beings who chose to work with reality instead of against it. They chose growth over comfort, truth over convenience, character over reputation. They chose to measure their lives not by what happened to them, but by how they responded to what happened to them. This is your moment. Not tomorrow when you feel more ready. Not next week when things calm down. Not next year when you've figured everything out. Right now. This conversation, this realization, this opportunity to choose differently, it's all happening in the only moment where your power actually exists. The present. The question isn't whether you can handle the truth. The question is whether you can handle living without it. The question isn't whether these changes will be difficult. The question is whether you can continue living as a smaller version of yourself when you know what you're capable of becoming. The question isn't whether you have time to transform your life. The question is whether you have time not to. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in his Meditations that most people never fully grasp until it's almost too late. Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. He wasn't talking about accepting loss passively. He was talking about understanding that every ending creates space for a new beginning. Every door that closes behind you is forcing you toward a door you haven't discovered yet. Every person who walks away is making room for someone who belongs in your story. Every failure is clearing the path toward your eventual success. But here's where most people get stuck. They cling to what's dying instead of embracing what's being born. They hold on to relationships that have run their course. They stay in jobs that are slowly killing their spirit. They remain in situations that once served them but now limit them. They mistake loyalty to their past for commitment to their future. The Stoics understood that attachment to specific outcomes is a form of suffering. Not because they didn't care about results, but because they knew that clinging too tightly to any particular result would prevent them from seeing better possibilities that were trying to emerge. They practiced what they called preferred indifference. Yes, they had preferences. Yes, they worked toward goals, but they held those preferences lightly, ready to release them if life had different plans. This doesn't mean becoming passive or giving up on your dreams. It means recognizing that your dreams might evolve as you do. The person you were 5 years ago wanted things that the person you are today has outgrown. The goals that once excited you might now feel small compared to what you're capable of achieving. The life you thought you wanted might be preventing you from discovering the life you're actually meant to live. Seneca practiced voluntary loss as a form of spiritual training. He would periodically give away possessions, live as if he were poor, or imagine losing everything he valued. Not because he wanted to suffer, but because he wanted to know he could handle whatever life took from him. He understood that the fear of loss often creates more suffering than the loss itself. Think about your own attachments. What are you holding on to so tightly that the possibility of losing it keeps you awake at night? What relationship, what job, what image of yourself, what plan for the future has become so important to you that you can't imagine who you'd be without it? That attachment is not love, it's fear disguised as love, and it's making you smaller than you need to be. The Stoics taught that everything you have is borrowed. Your health, your relationships, your abilities, even your life itself. These are temporary loans from the universe, and the universe will eventually call them back. This isn't a tragedy. It's the natural order of things. Fighting against this reality doesn't change it. It just adds unnecessary suffering to the inevitable process of change. But when you truly accept that everything is temporary, something liberating happens. You stop taking things for granted. You appreciate what you have while you have it instead of only missing it after it's gone. You love people more fully because you know your time with them is limited. You pursue your goals with more urgency because you understand that the window of opportunity won't stay open forever. This acceptance also frees you from the paralyzing fear of making the wrong choice. Because if everything is temporary anyway, no single decision will define your entire life. That job you're afraid to leave, it was always going to end eventually. That relationship you're scared to commit to. Every relationship ends either in separation or death. That risk you're avoiding, the regret of not taking it might last longer than any failure that could result from trying. Epictetus taught something that sounds harsh, but is actually compassionate. He said that wanting things to be different than they are is the root of all mental suffering. Not because circumstances can't improve, but because your peace can't depend on circumstances improving. Your happiness can't be held hostage by conditions beyond your control. Your sense of worth can't fluctuate based on external validation or achievement. This brings us to a truth that cuts deeper than all the others. You are not your circumstances, your achievements, your relationships, or your reputation. You are not your past mistakes or your future potential. You are not your thoughts, your emotions, or even your personality traits. All of these things are temporary aspects of your experience, but they are not your identity. The Stoics believed in something they called the inner citadel, a core part of yourself that remains untouched by external circumstances. This isn't some mystical concept. It's the part of you that observes your thoughts without being controlled by them. The part that experiences emotions without being defined by them. The part that can remain calm in chaos, dignified in defeat, and humble in victory. Most people never discover this inner citadel because they're too busy identifying with all the temporary aspects of their experience. They say, "I am anxious," instead of "I am experiencing anxiety." They say, "I am a failure," instead of "I tried something that didn't work out." They say, "I am worthless," instead of "I am going through a difficult time." This identification with temporary states creates unnecessary suffering because it makes you believe that when your circumstances change, you change. But your essential self, your inner citadel, remains constant regardless of what happens around you. It's the part of you that can find peace in any situation, strength in any challenge, and meaning in any experience. It's the part that knows you are more than your worst day and bigger than your biggest problem. It's the part that can't be diminished by criticism, inflated by praise, or defined by any external circumstance. Accessing this inner citadel requires a fundamental shift in how you see yourself. Instead of identifying with your roles, your achievements, or your circumstances, you identify with your capacity to respond consciously to whatever life presents. Instead of measuring your worth by external standards, you measure it by internal ones. How courageously did you face your fears? How honestly did you examine your motivations? How compassionately did you treat yourself and others when times were difficult? This shift doesn't happen overnight. The Stoics practiced it daily through self-examination, meditation, and conscious choice-making. They asked themselves hard questions. What am I afraid of losing? What am I trying to control that's beyond my control? What stories am I telling myself about what my circumstances mean? How am I letting external events dictate my internal state? But the most powerful practice was this. They regularly reminded themselves that they were going to die. Not to become morbid, but to maintain perspective about what actually matters. When you remember that your time is finite, you stop wasting it on things that don't contribute to your growth or the well-being of others. You stop getting caught up in petty dramas and meaningless competitions. You focus on what you can actually control and let go of everything else. This awareness of mortality also changes how you relate to other people. You realize that everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about. Everyone is struggling with their own fears, insecurities, and limitations. Everyone is trying to make sense of an existence that often feels confusing and overwhelming. This recognition naturally leads to more compassion, more patience, and more understanding. The Stoics understood that we're all in this together. Not in some superficial everything happens for a reason way, but in the deep recognition that we're all temporary arrangements of matter and energy trying to create meaning in an inherently meaningless universe. We're all going to face loss, pain, disappointment, and death. We're all going to make mistakes, hurt people we love, and fall short of our own expectations. But we're also all capable of moments of incredible beauty, love, courage, and transcendence. We can create art that moves people long after we're gone. We can love so deeply that it changes the people we love forever. We can act with such integrity that we inspire others to be better than they thought possible. We can face our own mortality with such dignity that it gives others permission to do the same. This is the final liberation that Stoicism offers. Freedom from the illusion that your worth depends on external circumstances. Freedom from the need to have everything figured out. Freedom from the fear of death that keeps so many people from truly living. Freedom to be exactly who you are while constantly becoming who you're meant to be. The path forward is both simple and difficult. Simple because the principles are clear and the practices are straightforward. Difficult because applying them consistently requires courage, discipline, and a willingness to keep choosing growth over comfort, truth over convenience, character over reputation. But every day you practice these principles, you become a little freer. Every time you choose your response instead of defaulting to your reaction, you reclaim a piece of your power. Every moment you remember that you are more than your circumstances, you connect with that unshakable core that no external force can touch. The Stoics didn't promise that life would be easy. They promised that you could become strong enough to handle whatever difficulty arose. They didn't guarantee that you'd get everything you wanted. They guaranteed that you could find contentment regardless of what you received. They didn't assure you that you'd live forever. They assured you that you could live fully for whatever time remained. This is not about becoming emotionless or detached from life. It's about becoming so grounded in your own worth, so clear about your own values, so connected to your own inner strength that nothing external can shake your fundamental peace. It's about loving deeply while holding lightly, caring intensely while remaining unattached to specific outcomes, working hard while accepting whatever results emerge. The person who masters these principles doesn't avoid pain, but they're not controlled by it. They don't eliminate uncertainty, but they're comfortable with it. They don't prevent loss, but they're not devastated by it. They don't stop caring, but their caring doesn't depend on being cared for in return. This is the freedom that lies on the other side of these harsh truths. A freedom so complete that it can't be given or taken away by anyone else. A peace so profound that it doesn't depend on circumstances. A strength so deep that it grows stronger under pressure rather than breaking. A joy so genuine that it exists independent of external conditions. The question that remains is simple but not easy. Are you ready to stop being a prisoner of your own expectations, attachments, and fears? Are you ready to discover who you really are beneath all the roles you play and stories you tell yourself? Are you ready to live with the urgency that comes from knowing your time is limited, and the peace that comes from knowing your worth is not? The choice, as always, is yours. But choose quickly. The clock is still ticking, and every moment you spend preparing to live is a moment you're not actually living. Every day you postpone this transformation is another day you remain smaller than you need to be. Every hour you spend seeking happiness in the wrong places is an hour stolen from the joy that's available to you right now. The Stoics left us a gift. A way of seeing, a way of being, a way of responding to life's challenges that has sustained people through wars, plagues, exiles, and every form of human suffering imaginable. But it's not enough to understand this gift intellectually. You have to unwrap it. You have to use it. You have to live it. Because on the other side of these harsh truths lies everything you've been looking for. Not in the form you expected, but in the form you actually need. Not as comfort, but as strength. Not as certainty, but as courage. Not as perfection, but as growth. Not as forever, but as right now. This moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this choice. This is where your freedom lives. This is where your power exists. This is where your transformation begins. The only question left is whether you're ready to claim it. These 6 harsh truths aren't just ideas to think about. They're tools to forge your character, weapons to cut through illusion, and keys to unlock a freedom most people never discover. You now hold the blueprint that Marcus Aurelius used to rule an empire while remaining unshaken by its pressures. The same principles that kept Epictetus free even in chains. The wisdom that allowed Seneca to face exile and death with dignity intact. But here's the final truth that cuts deepest of all. Knowledge without action is just sophisticated procrastination. You can understand every word of this video, feel inspired by every principle, and still remain exactly where you are if you don't start living these truths today, right now, in the next choice you make. Don't let this be another video you watch and forget. Don't let this wisdom become just another collection of quotes to share on social media. The Stoics didn't write these principles to impress anyone. They lived them to survive everything, to thrive in chaos, to find meaning in suffering, to discover peace in uncertainty.